Hey guys, welcome back to the channel DC Canon Toys. Hope all of you guys are doing well. Today we have another figure unboxing and review to look at. Today will be the Fate Grand Order Berserker Lancelot by Sentinel. Let's check out the box and get the unboxing started. In the front we have a cool picture of Lancelot in his Berserker form, with the title Berserker Lancelot. At the bottom, we have the Fate Grand Order title and symbol, as well as the Type Moon FGO project wording at the bottom. In terms of the back, we have more cool pictures of Lancelot. We also have the Sentinel brand symbol at the top left. Here we have our Berserker Lancelot unboxed. So straight out of the box, he comes like this. We do have a signature piece over here for the accessory, which is sort of his headband. I'll attach this one before I show you guys a 360 view first. Now for our 360 view. An introduction of our character Lancelot today is that he is known as the Berserker class servant of Carrier Mato during the 4th Holy Grail War in anime known as Fate Zero. He's also a servant of Risuka Fujimaru in the game Fate Grand Order. Identity is the Knight of the Lake, the person serving as the negative symbol of the Arthurian legend. Furthermore, the Knight of the Lake, admired as the strongest even among the Knights of the Round Table, he was extremely loyal to King Arthur as one of the Knights of the Round Table. Lancelot's downfall began when he fell in love with Arthuria's queen, Guinevere. Now let's move on to the aesthetics and paint job of the figure. Overall, from first glance, even from far away, the aesthetics of Lancelot looks extremely cool and very pleasing to the eyes, especially if you're a fan of the designs of the medieval armor. In terms of Lancelot, we have some crazy designs for his armor, so let's start with the head and take a closer detailed look. In terms of the head design, he is wearing helmet all the time in his Berserker form. We do have a rounded off top part of the helmet, but we have a lot of creases and edges towards the chin, making a pointy part of the helmet. Some interesting detailed design of the helmet is that if we look at the side view, we do see a visor of sorts from the eye view part of the helmet. And inside there is red paint job. It is really faint and you can only kind of see it in the edges. Sometimes you don't really see it at all, but ending with the visor part on the side of the face, we have another X formation for the design of the eye hole of the helmet armor. Taking another look at the side view, we have some very interesting helmet designs for the back side of the head. Even as a fan of Fate series and Fate Grand Order the game, I didn't even know details like that existed at the back of Lancelot's helmet. Now in terms of the color of Lancelot Berserker figure over here, I would say the overall color theme is a metallic color of either a deep blue or a deep purple. It's kind of hard to pinpoint, but you guys get the idea. As for the helmet, interesting enough, we do have a color separation over here for the diamond cut triangle designs at the back of the head. We have some black as well used for color separation. Obviously, we also have a pure light purple for his signature headband. Now let's take a closer look at the upper body. So in terms of the chest armor design, we have some interesting symbols at the center of the chest, but we also have this rib cage design which wraps around the chest. Even wrapping around the chest for the rib cage design, we see some more details in form of spikes. As for the shoulder armor, they look very spiky as well. We have these 3 spikes on each side at the edges, and we also have the pointy part at the end of the shoulder armor here as well as here. So overall, the shoulder armor design as well as the upper body design of the armor looks incredibly detailed, and there's a lot of 3D features to them. Moving on, looking at the arms for the armors, we do have this very interesting double spike piece at the elbows. As we can see here, it almost acts as a blade sort of weapon design at the elbows. We do have a shorter piece here and a longer piece over here for the protruding blade design of the elbow. As we move down, we have this one bracelet ring design at the top of the wrist, and at the wrist we have a bigger ring design which is also spiky. Here's the alternative angle of the elbow and the hands. Because Lancelot is in his armor form, as for the hands, they also look armored up and seems a little bit spiky as well. In terms of the waist design, we do have a skirt armor, and they're in two segments on each side. So we have a top part and a bottom part. I believe this is one piece though. And we also have a front skirt armor over here. For the front armor, we have another carving design. Similarly to the chest piece, which we have a carving design as well at the middle section of the armor. Another thing to point out is that while Lancelot is covered in armor, we do have some parts that seems to be less armored up, which is in the color separation of black. So we have these parts at the biceps, as we see here, and also at the inner thighs. So those are done in black instead of the deep purple metallic. Moving down to the legs, overall the armor pieces look normal, and there is many carving designs such as these pads over here, and we have a lot of carving at the thighs as well. The interesting design part is probably the knee armor again. We have that spiked look which is common throughout the design of his armor. Here's a quick side view at the spiked up knee armor. We have more carving as well at the legs. Lastly, when we move on to the feet design, of course it is done in armor and it looks extremely pointy just like the rest of the body. I'll just let you guys have a closer look at it, but something similar in terms of the wrist design is at the ankles of the feet. We also have these double ring designs, which is evident on the wrist of this figure. Here's a quick side view. Overall, for the aesthetics of this figure, it looks extremely amazing, and Sentinel really blew my mind in terms of their design for the armor. To replicate Lancelot's armor in this amount of detail is truly amazing to have in a figure form. I look forward to posing with this figure in the future for sure. Before we move on to the accessories, just a quick look at the back section of the armor. We do have some more spikes over here, and there's some holes besides these spikes which we will use later to plug in those wire accessories included in this Berserker Lancelot. The first accessory included I have already attached to the figure to show you guys, which is this purple headband, and it plugs in very easily at the peg over here, and it is quite articulated. It really makes the figure looks much more dynamic. Although majority of the color, as I mentioned earlier, is this light purple color, I do notice at the ends of the purple, it sort of fades away to black, which represents Lancelot very well because in the show, he has this shadowy aurora around him every time he attacks and uses his abilities. In terms of the hand accessories, we do have some extra pairs of hands. The one that we see attached to Lancelot right now is the closed fists. Next, we have a pair of open palms, and these look really good because the fact that Lancelot over here has extra sharp designs on the hand, it really makes him look menacing. Lastly, for the third pair of hands, we have a set of holding hands. So these are used to hold his weapon accessory, which I will show you guys now. The first accessory we have over here is his signature sword that we've seen in the Fate series, if you're a fan. Of course, Lancelot's sword here is in a very interesting design and matches his armor very well. And if you guys ever played the Fate games before, in the original series, if he is not in the Berserker state, this sword is actually another color, but since he is summoned in the Berserker state, this sword is in a darker color theme matching his armor. But there is an interesting design over here that I didn't know existed. We have a chain over here which is chained up to the handles and to the blade. And as you guys can see, I can sort of just move it around a little bit by tapping it. So that's a very nice small detail that they didn't need to include, but I guess they included and I'm not complaining. As for the length of the sword, it's almost up to the head in the full length. So it's quite a huge sword. And we do have some insignia over here on the blade itself, more carvings at the top, a very nice looking handle and a guard. So let's put this on him and check it out. Here we have Lancelot holding his signature sword. Just a very simple pose with the sword over the shoulders. He already looks amazing. I think it's the fact that his armor looks extremely cool. So any pose he does with the sword is just extra. Here's just one more look at Lancelot holding the sword. And for the next accessory, we do have his signature weapon in the Berserker form, which is this rod over here. As for the rod itself, it is higher than Lancelot's height. We do have some nice detailed of red carvings in the rod itself, and it is constant throughout the whole rod weapon or staff weapon. Here we have Lancelot holding his signature staff weapon. This weapon I believe he only have in his Berserker form, and the red that we see on the staff itself is supposed to represent his abilities along with the shadowy aurora in which he takes over things with his powers. I remember in Phase 0 he took over a fighter jet plane in the same way in which his shadow aurora and the red that we see inside the shadow aurora starts to take over different objects. I hope I explained it correctly, but if you're confused, I don't blame you. Make sure you watch Phase 0, it's a great anime in the Phase series for sure. If you wanted to, Lancelot of course can also dual wield his weapons because we do have two holding hands. As for the last accessory included in the Lancelot figure, we have this whiplash sort of thing, and it is actually made in bendable wire, which is pretty nice. It means we can bend it around any way we like. And at the end point, we do have a similar colored to his armor part, which we have this dagger looking endpoint. And this is supposed to be like a whiplash ability that Lancelot uses in the show. And we just connect it to the back peg holes, which I mentioned earlier in the aesthetics. So we have 6 of these and we can plug all of them in. Let's see the results once we plug it in. Alright, so here is what Lancelot looks like attached with the wired accessory. These 6 whiplashes. It looks pretty crazy to me, and because they're bendable, if you take some time with it, you can definitely make them look very cool in certain positions. He sort of reminded me of Iron Spider with the 6 whiplash at the back. So let's check out the back view so you guys can get an idea of the connection points. Yeah, so even at the back, it looks pretty crazy and it doesn't really look weird in my opinion. Being connected in the armor, it just looks kind of cool actually from the back too. Here's a closer look at the connection point itself. Here is another pose I did, just working with the wires around a bit. Now time for the articulation. So I'm actually quite interested in terms of the articulation. The head, we have the 360 looking upwards. So looking upwards is not that good. That's about it. Looking forwards is much better. So it does seem like the neck is double jointed side to side. As for the headband itself, because it is on a ball joint, it goes all the way up, all the way down, and it can rotate side to side 360. Now for the arms, we have a 360 rotation. We can lift all the way up around that much until the armor hits the chest plates, but I feel like this is enough for most poses, so pretty good. As for the shoulder pads or shoulder armors themselves, you can rotate them forward and backwards, wiggle them a little bit. We have a bicep swivel and elbow bend. Of course, the wrist, we have a rotation and a slight wiggle. Something I didn't mention earlier is that the hand is connected on a ball joint, so that's why we have a wiggle as well. Something interesting with the chest articulation is that there's no actual butterfly joint like on some figures, so we can't really move the arm forwards that much, but there is sort of a separation in the chest armor. As you guys can see, if I push out this way, you can move them outwards a little bit like that, and you can see the chest got buffer like that towards the side, and you can move them back down. So something like that does exist, but I wouldn't consider it a true butterfly joint. Onto the waist section, the upper waist, we have a rotation, and it seems like it's on the ball joint, so we have a back, forwards, side to side. Side to side is decent considering the design of the armor. And for the lower waist, we do have a rotation as well, but it is not as loose. And it gets blocked off a little bit compared to the upper rotation. So most likely we'll just be using this upper rotation for waist articulation. As for the skirt armors, okay, so they're actually made out of rubber, so there is some bend to them, but I wouldn't suggest you to bend them to the max because they might break off. They don't actually have articulation. That's pretty surprising. I thought these skirt armor would move up and down, but they don't really. As you can see here, when I move it up, it is just the bend that's given off by the rubber materials. Anyways, moving on to the legs, we have thigh rotation. You can kick all the way up like that. So not too bad, and all the way backwards, sideways. Pretty good actually, but again, we're stressing the skirt armor when we do poses like this, so I wouldn't keep him in those kind of poses for long in case over time the skirt armor becomes broken, the rubber getting ripped off. As for the knee articulation, that's a pretty good bend. Let's see the knee armor spike, if there's any articulation here. Okay, so this doesn't really have any articulation for the armor part itself, but this spiky part is made out of rubber too at the edges, as we can see here. It's probably for safety and you can bend it a bit. Moving on to the bottom, of course, we have our ankle articulation in this rotation, forwards, backwards, also side to side. We can do some articulation, and the toe pivot. So the toe pivot is just a little bit, is barely any. You can pivot forwards too, which is pretty interesting, but it gets blocked off by the design, so it's barely any. But overall, in terms of the articulation, I feel like it's actually pretty decent for the armor design. I thought the articulation might be worse, but Sentinel did a good job on the articulation itself. In addition, I'm not going to show you guys the articulation of this bendy wire accessory because I sort of showed you guys earlier. You can bend them whichever way you want because there are wires inside this whiplash piece. But I would suggest not to bend them too often because eventually the wire may break and we don't really want that. So before we move on to the size comparison, I just want to try something for you guys because in the original promo shots, it shows Lancelot using guns. And I have some little armory guns over here, a submachine gun and a sniper rifle. Also in the game, he actually uses guns which is imbued with his Dark Aurora. So I believe we can still sort of pair these 1/12 scale guns in his hands. So let's try that out. The actual figure itself does not come with these guns. The guns that I'm using is from Little Armory, but the promo shots of this project or this figure itself, they did show him holding guns. There we go. So as I guessed, it is correct. He can hold 1/12 scale guns no problem with the holding hands, and these Little Armory ones are definitely a match for him because when they come unpainted, they're usually black, and it actually matches the guns that Lancelot uses in the game with his Dark Aurora. So if you guys are interested, you can also get these Little Armory guns to use with Lancelot over here. Alright, now for some size comparisons, we have a SH Figuarts Goku, Super Saiyan Blue. Here's a Mafex Deadpool. He seems taller than Deadpool still. Now the one that we all want to see, of course, is our Saber Artoria. Lancelot is supposed to be taller than Saber, so these two fit pretty well. Although, in my opinion, in terms of a Figma scale, Lancelot is a tiny bit taller, but it works. So any type of picture taking or posing, I feel like these two will work together already very well. Here's a taller Fate Figma, which is Merlin. And a last one for good measure, our Figma Master from Chaldea. Alright, so for final thoughts on today's figure review, which is the Fate Grand Order Berserker class Lancelot from Sentinel. Overall, I have to say, I haven't enjoyed a figure as much as this one for a while, and it is definitely a breath of fresh air compared to my normal figures from SH Figuarts and Figma. Sentinel definitely did a good job, and I have to applaud them in terms of the sculpting of the armor itself, because as we've seen in the review, the armor itself is quite spiky and complicated, And to represent that in real life in a toy figure, Sentinel did an excellent job. Alternatively, the articulation is extremely well done for what it is, and because of the armor itself, I thought the articulation wouldn't be as good. Sentinel also did a good job over there. Now in terms of negatives, there aren't too many, but there is one that I want to mention is that the color theme is sort of dark for this Lancelot figure. It's not really the figure's fault, it is the design of the character. So in real life, when you take pictures or videos, it might be a bit harder to get all that nice sculpting details. But other than that, one more thing I want to mention to be careful of is the whiplash accessory. Although they're made of bendy wires and you can bend them in different poses, they still can't carry the weight of themselves in certain angles. And I feel like if you bend them a lot, you might risk breaking the wires itself in the whiplash accessory. And nobody wants a broken whiplash accessory for their Lancelot figure because afterwards you no longer can pose them. So be careful with that again. Anyways, there goes the end of today's review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please remember to support the channel by liking and subscribing. I would really appreciate that. As always, my friends, remember to stay young at heart, and we're out.
I lost a couple friends on my way up. I took a couple L's, but that's just normal talk. I popped a couple pills, but they don't do much. And now I take Prozac in the morning with some other stuff.